Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Ebony-Jane Carroll, author of Eggs. EJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Are you ready to get started?
Sure am.
All right, question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
I would have to say, don't listen to too many voices. I would say write your first draft how you want to do it and carefully choose maybe 2 or 3 people to critique it and then edit from there. You can't please everyone, and if you open yourself up to too many opinions, it's likely to make you feel confused and rob you of momentum. Asking family and friends for opinions can be risky for a few reasons. Firstly, they may not be the best qualified to make a judgment, and secondly, their criticisms can be taken personally or upset the relationship you have. So perhaps a writer's group or a professional editor would be best. I used an editor who was encouraging but honest, and I didn't take it personally because we didn't know each other and I was paying her for her constructive feedback.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is you have to work with people that aren't afraid to give you their opinion, because at the end of the day, they have your best interests at heart. And I'm like that with my clients. I like to be very direct and clear, but by doing that, they just know that we have their back and we want to make sure that we're doing everything possible to make sure it's the best product.
That's right. I agree.
Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Getting your foot in the door. I think if you don't know anyone in the publishing world and you're just one of many manuscripts sitting on a pile waiting to get rejected, basically. So I think the hard lesson I've learned is even if your story is great, sometimes that doesn't matter. I've realized that talent won't necessarily get you where you want to go. There needs to be that lucky break. But I also think statistically, the more you keep putting yourself out there and mixing in the right circles, the chances of getting that break will increase, but there's still no guarantee. I ended up self-publishing and I really enjoyed the process of having a lot of artistic control. So that was a plus for resulting to doing it myself. But the only downside is that you will have to promote your book yourself. And this is not something I personally enjoy. I'd much rather go back to the writing process and start on another project. But I went into schools for a year and I offered free literacy incursions. My background is teaching. And so I used my book. And then if I was lucky, children would buy it. Some days I did really well, some days I didn't. And it usually depended on how well the school had marketed me in their newsletters or how organised they were with their order forms. I also slogged it out at markets and I would set up my stand and sit in the heat or the rain all day, and sometimes I'd only sell 5 books. Social media is also something I don't really enjoy, and I did feel pressure to stay fresh and add updates regularly to keep people interested, because that's the way of the world. But I actually even managed to get my state's biggest selling newspaper to do an article on me, and it was half a page. The newspaper is read by millions of people daily, and it had my website advertised, but this did not increase sales, and I think it was the wrong platform. So, however, I do have parents and teachers email me all the time and tell me how much a child or a student loves my book and they want to read it every day. So if you get good feedback and you believe in your story, then perhaps self-publishing is right for you. I'm currently working on another 2 books at the moment. I took a break of 5 years because I was disappointed that it didn't put food on the table, so to speak, but I do feel energized to try my hand again.
Well, and I think it's one of the things is that even if you go through traditional publishing, with the exception of a couple of companies, they still expect you to do the lion's share of the marketing, the promotions. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is authors just want to write books. They don't want to have to do all these different promotional things.
No, we're the creatives. We don't want to be out there marketing. That's not our forte.
Yeah, and that's kind of unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast these days, is that you do have to get out there and market. So it's one of the things I always tell my prospective clients is you have to get out your comfort zone. And It's just the way it has to be right now, especially if you want to eventually turn this into a full-time opportunity, because it sounds like your books are outstanding. I mean, when you get the feedback that you have a child that wants to read your book every day, I mean,
Every
that's
day.
huge.
I know. I took me a while to believe that was true, but I've had the comments come rolling in. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about the dreaded marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
I was fortunate enough to have a company called Book Cover Cafe help me give me some tips about this because I had no idea what I was doing. So, um, word of mouth was probably the biggest success I had because I'm a teacher and I've got a lot of teacher friends, and they would just pass the message on, and the message would spread in the community. As well as local bookshops. I think if you go in there and introduce yourself and say you're a local author, offer a free book for a colouring competition or something like that, they'll put your book in the window for the month. Um, I did manage to get one Australian celebrity to put my book on their Instagram. She did this voluntarily, but again, that didn't actually do much. So uh, the other big tip I was given was building hype is really, really important. Again, not something I was comfortable doing, but you have to do it. There has to be lots of excitement and build up long before the book comes out, which I think is key. As you know, this is a common strategy that is used with new films coming out. So I also think timing is really important as well. So my book Eggs is a perfect Easter gift. So it was released a couple of months before Easter.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points, and especially the importance of two things. One, positive word of mouth, and the other part is building hype. And I was actually just thinking of a great example is Dwayne Johnson, otherwise known as The Rock. Anytime
Yes.
that he's on the set doing a movie, I know he's doing the Fast and Furious spinoff right now, and he is constantly posting pictures from the set. He's promoting it, so he's already getting that build up. And the thing is, you can use that same strategy when you're writing your book and talking about the writing journey, or your book's going through editing as, oh man, I got all these revisions, or talking about the formatting process, and also the covers, like, hey, I'm thinking of a couple different covers here, what do you guys think? And even having contests where you have people share your images and have them vote on it. So there's a lot of different tactics that you can use, but you're right, it's like you're having to bring them along the entire journey. And that's exactly what a lot of these film stars do, like The Rock. And you can actually use that strategy yourself as you go through your next book.
Yeah, I would just say to first time authors, I did learn it the hard way, but you sort of have to mentally be prepared for that slog as well, because when you've finished your project or your book, you're so exhausted, but then you've got to kick it into a second gear because now it's time to push it.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
I've chosen a book called The Anatomy of Story, which is by John Truby. He's a very well respected story consultant in Hollywood, and some of his students wrote Sleepless in Seattle, Scream, and Shrek. It's the perfect straightforward guide to writing a great story. When I read his book, I realized if you don't have characters of depth, you have nothing. I think audiences need to relate to and care about the characters in order to in order to care about finding out what happens to them. So people like to read people. Don't skim on the characters. You need background, secrets, quirks, likability. You really have to invest in them because I think they make the story.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
I love the Oscar Wilde quote, "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken." This quote, this quote, it gives me the permission to be okay with thinking outside the box and stop worrying if people think my writing is good, bad, or somewhere in between. No one else's brain works like your own, and that's why we love reading a novel or watching a movie. We want to get out of our own head and be taken on an adventure. So I know when I'm asked about my book Eggs and I explain it to people, some of them say, huh, that's different. And I say, yeah, but children love it because it's so different. And I believe all the weird and wacky ideas you have will end up working in your favor.
Yeah, I remember when we were talking prior to starting this recording, and we're going through the name of your book, and you said eggs. I was like, wow, one, it's easy to spell, and two, it's direct, it's to the point, and it's very clear. And I love the fact that you launched the book around Easter. That's just perfect synergy.
It is, yes.
And
Yep.
I was having a chuckle because you actually mentioned one of my favorite quotes about being yourself because everyone else is taken. So I kind of laughed on that because I absolutely love that quote.
Yeah, it's a good one to live by.
Well, EJ, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
My website is EJ Carroll, spelled EJCarroll.com.au.
EJ, thanks again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you for having me, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.